Thank you.
And that's it for Counterspin for this week. Counterspin is produced by FAIR, the National Media Watch Group based in New York. The show's engineered by Alex Noyes. I'm Janine Jackson. Thanks for listening to Counterspin.
You are listening to WGDR Plainfield, WGDH Hardwick Goddard College Community Radio, online at WGDR.org and Facebook.
You're listening to In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio on WGDR 91.1 and WGDH 91.7.
Good morning, Canna friends and Canna foes, and welcome to September. This is the first Friday of September, guys. We're here. You guys are there. This is In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio. We're going to get this show started right off here. Great news coming your way, guys. A lot of great, interesting stuff in the news that we want to talk about. We have an issue came up with the show today. Somebody had a meeting. It is a Friday, so unfortunately our guest today, Adrienne Uthe of the National Association of Cannabis Businesses, cannot be with us today, but unfortunately, hopefully we'll get her on the line again. So guys, stay with us. We're not going to go anywhere. We're still here for you. Again, any questions, any comments, any concerns about anything within the cannabis industry, give us a call. 802-454-7762. Again, a lot of great news coming your way. Stay tuned. Here is the Canna News with Joe Smith. Don't go anywhere. This is Joseph Smith of In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio, and now for your Canna News for September 6, 2019. Sonoma County shuts down 63,000 cannabis plant grow site. California officials are continuing their crackdown on illegal cannabis cultivators as the Sonoma County Permit and Resource Management Department shut down a 63,241 plant grow, the country's largest ever, according to a CBS local San Francisco report. The illegal cultivation sites were located in a habitat for endangered California tiger salamanders. About 26,650 plants were found on a 2.5-acre site, while another 36,385 plants were being grown on a 3.3-acre site, and some were interspersed with corn. Permit and Resource Management Department spokeswoman Maggie Fleming said that the largest previous cannabis cultivation site shut down by the county was 13,000 plants in all. County officials have abated 161,000 this year. In June, Siskiyou County officials said they had seized more than 19,000 illegally grown cannabis plants in 1 month. Since the launch of legal sales in California through July, the Bureau of Cannabis Control and law enforcement agencies report they have confiscated about $30 million in illegal cannabis from grows and unlicensed shops. Lindsay Robinson, executive director of the California Cannabis Industry Association, told the Los Angeles Times in July that the number of enforcement actions by the Bureau is severely inadequate, knowing that there should be hundreds of enforcement actions on illegally operating shops. She said the state has always struggled with enforcement of the illicit industry. In July, the California Finance Department found that just 15 of 68 BCC enforcement positions had been filled, and the agency was experiencing a major cash shortage, which prevented it from providing adequate enforcement. Hemp farming quadrupled in the U.S. this year, new report shows. The amount of land on which U.S. farmers are licensed to grow hemp has more than quadrupled this year. That's according to a report released on Thursday by the advocacy group Vote Hemp. Under the provisions of the 2014 Farm Bill, farmers have been able to grow crops for limited hemp research programs, but thanks to a new version of the large-scale agricultural legislation passed and signed into law late last year, the plant is now officially legal under federal law as long as farmers comply with state rules. Quebec court finds home grow ban unconstitutional. A Quebec, Canada Superior Court judge has ruled that the provincial ban on home cannabis cultivation for personal use is unconstitutional. The Superior Court Justice Manon Lavoie said the ban equals criminal legislation, which is under federal jurisdiction. Julian Fortier, the attorney who brought the case, told the CBC that while the ruling allows individuals to grow cannabis at home, the ruling is very technical and warned that the government can still appeal to the ruling or try to rewrite the law in a constitutional way. Under federal cannabis law, citizens are allowed to cultivate up to 4 plants for personal use, but Quebec's law banned home growing. A Quebec official said the government is studying the ruling. Among Canadian provinces, Quebec has taken a conservative approach to the cannabis policy and legalization. In July, the government announced a ban on THC-infused candies and confections and capped edible potency at 5 milligrams per THC unit and 10 milligrams of THC per package. Drinkable products are capped at 5 milligrams per container. Cannabis-infused topicals will also be banned temporarily. Provincial officials are also considering setting THC limits of 30% on all cannabis products sold in the province, but not officially implemented in the policy. Under federal rules, edible products are limited to 10 milligrams of THC per package and 1,000 milligrams of THC per package for concentrates and topicals. USDA says hemp qualifies for federal crop insurance. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has announced that hemp cultivated for fiber, flour, or seeds is now eligible for federal crop insurance. Hemp farmers eligible under the program can insure plants with revenues up to $8.5 million. Numerous producers are anxious for a way to protect their hemp crops from natural disasters. The whole farm revenue protection policy will provide a safety net for them. We expect to be able to offer additional hemp coverage options as the USDA continues implementing the 2018 Farm Bill, said USDA Risk Management Agency Administrator Martin Barbie. To be eligible, farmers must be compliant under their state and federal regulations, and hemp having THC above the compliance level will not constitute an insurable cause of loss, the release states. It's the latest move by the USDA following the 2018 legalization of hemp federally via the Farm Bill. In May, the agency issued its first organic certification for a hemp flower product, although the agency had certified other hemp products in the past, such as Food and Drug Administration approved hemp flower products. The following month, the USDA released guidance for important hemp seeds, which previously required Drug Enforcement Administration approval. Following the passage of the Farm Bill, states that could enact their own hemp cultivation program, but those must first be approved by the USDA to take effect. The agency has so far not approved any of the state-approved plans, but the agency notes that in the release that those regulations are expected later this year. UK Health Institute rejects CBD as epilepsy treatment. The National Institute for Healthcare and Excellence, a United Kingdom policy group, has decided not to recommend CBD with clobazam for treatment-resistant epilepsy conditions, Dravet, and Lennox-Gastaut syndromes. According to a Medscape report, CBD with clobazam is used in the GW Pharma drug Epidiolex. The director of the NICE Center for Health Technology Evaluation said that the committee accepts that the evidence shows that the cannabidol with clobazam reduces seizures frequently, but its long-term effects is unknown. Boyson added that NICE is committed to working with the company to resolve the economic modeling issues identified by the committee and to help them understand why they may need to mitigate the cost of cannabidol to the NHS. Professor David Newt, head of the Center for Neuropsychopharmacology at Imperial College London, told Medscape that CBD by itself particularly isn't effective for treating epilepsy syndromes, and that most of the successful outcomes have come from the use of cannabis oil that also contains THC and THCV. Earlier this month, NHS England reported that the lack of quality data was a major hurdle to NHS patients being able to obtain cannabis-based medicines. Delaware lawmakers approve marijuana legalization bill. A Delaware House committee approved a bill to legalize marijuana for adult use in the state on Wednesday. The legislation would allow people aged 21 and older to possess, consume, and purchase certain amounts of cannabis. It also contains a number of social equity provisions, including expungements for individuals with prior possession convictions. The House Revenue and Finance Committee signed off on a bill in a 8-3 vote. It now heads to the full chamber for consideration. A majority of lawmakers in the state's House voted in favor of separate legalization bill last year, but because it dealt with taxes and fees, it required votes from 60% of the chamber and fell short of the supermajority threshold for passage. If the current legislation is ultimately approved and signed into law, legalization will see a gradual rollout. A state marijuana commissioner will be responsible for issuing licenses and regulating cannabis businesses. Initially, only 15 retailers will receive licenses 3 years after the effective date. Additional retailer licenses could be approved if there's sufficient demand. The commissioner will also issue licenses for 5 testing facilities, 50 cultivation sites, and 30 product manufacturers. Applicants will be scored based on several factors, including their diversity objectives, environmental sustainability plans, and what kind of benefits they will offer their employees. Existing medical cannabis dispensaries will also have a licensing advantage. Home cultivation would not be allowed under the bill. Prospective marijuana businesses would have to pay a $5,000 application fee, and there would also be a biannual $10,000 licensing renewal fee for retailers. Testing facilities and product manufacturers, a month after the effective date, an 11-month transition period will occur, with cannabis sales taxed at 25%. Once the transition is over, sales would be taxed at 15%. Revenue from those taxes will cover costs of regulating the program, and then the legislature would be tasked with allocating any additional revenue to programs it deems fit. A fiscal note for the bill estimated that the annual costs associated with the program would be about $1.3 million, in addition to the one-time implementation cost projection of $440,000. Those costs would be offset by revenue gained through fees and taxes. However, with legalization projected to bring in anywhere between $9.4 million to $23.6 million each year. Illinois sets strict rules for cannabis growers on how much water and energy they can use. Both recreational and medical cannabis growers in Illinois will have to meet high standards for their energy and water use. A state law signed by Governor J.B. Pritzker in June places limits on the amount of water and electricity growers can use, as well as setting requirements for water runoff and wastewater. The legislation's sustainability requirements for growers is among the strictest in the nation, according to Sam Milton, a consultant at Climate Resource Group, which helps businesses, regulators, and other organizations pursue climate-friendly business practices. It definitely puts Illinois at or near the top in terms of state policies for energy and environmental performance for cultivation facilities, he said. Illinois growers must use automatic watering systems and limit how much water runoff they produce, according to a new state law. They also have to collect and filter wastewater so that it could be used to water their plants in the future. In terms of energy consumption, a grower can use no more than 36 watts per square foot for lighting the plants. That standard is similar to one in Massachusetts, but the Illinois law goes even further. And that's it for your local and national Can News for September 6, 2019.
All right, we are back again, guys. You're listening to WGDR Plainfield, WGDH Hardwick. This is Goddard College Community Radio, 91.1 FM and 91.7. Right now, we are in the weeds. Unfortunately, today's show, our special guest had a meeting to go to. It happens on Fridays, especially in this crazy industry. So we want to give a big shout out to Adrienne Uthe of the National Association of Cannabis Businesses, and hopefully we'll get her back on the air. But I have still the one, the only OLCC certified cannabis experts in the country, Brandon Barberio. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, pretty good. You know, I mean, you're right. It's kind of hectic right now. You know, it's getting pretty close to harvest season. People are, you know, running around trying to make ends meet. You know, this is payday for everybody, pretty much. You know, this is where what everybody's been waiting for.
Right? I mean, and that's a discussion we can talk about as well. I mean, bring a couple of grower tips and advices in. But again, if anybody's listening to today's show and you want to give us a call, you want to talk about issues, struggles, your grow,
the government, anything you want to talk about that's cannabis-related, cannabis-based, health, wellness, anything like that, give us a call. 802-454-7762 will get you right into the studio today. We are going to have our phone lines open. A little bit later in the show today, we'll be talking to Timothy Fair of Vermont Cannabis Solutions. Big shout out to those guys. So we'll be talking about legal issues, laws, things that you should know about, things that you should be concerned about, and clear up some gray matter on those discussions. So if you got again, guys, if you have any questions, just give us a call, 802-454-7762. So, Brandon, a lot going on this week. A lot. One of the best things I saw, and we love seeing this everywhere across the country, is that Delaware lawmakers approve a medical, or actually just a regular cannabis legalization bill. Great things going on, obviously, across the states. One of the most interesting things I read over the week was there's literally only 3 states left that haven't legalized, at least in a medical, facilities, a type, something like that. So there's only 3 states left in the country. So obviously the country is well on board with legalization.
Yeah.
Now it's just the state levels, right? But now, the interesting thing about reading over the Delaware House Committee approval and the bill that they have on the table is, there's a lot of great things going on there, but, low plant counts. And the one thing that struck me kind of off to the side, which is something that we discussed last week, was, they're saying no home grows. So they want to support the dispensary systems in Maryland, and now they're saying no home grow. So, with that being said, how do we feel about the lack of a home grow?
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. How do you legalize cannabis but then tell someone that they don't have the right to grow it in their own house? That's just not right at all. I understand, I guess. I see that, they want the dispensary system to be supported. And, of course, I'm sure they're doing it purposely so that they can funnel that money into, programs and where the state of Delaware actually needs it. When you look at states that have been established for a very long time, and they're starting to, fund different organizations. Like Colorado's putting $3 million into the homeless.
Right.
Other states want to be on those levels too, and the problem is that if everybody is growing their own cannabis, then the state's not really making money, if you will, because. But
aren't they still in sales tax? There's other ways to look at where the state can make money on certain issues of that nature. Because I know in Vermont, in our state here, we have a sales tax. Anything you need to buy to accommodate that grow will still being taxed. So it's not like they're not getting any money back out of it.
Well, no, but they're not getting the direct money that they would make from the sale of cannabis if people are growing it. There's a bill that's actually that we're looking at here in Arizona for the recreational market, and that would give the ability for one adult to grow 6 flowering plants in Arizona. I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but me personally, myself, you give me the ability to grow 6 plants in my house, I'm never going to need or want for cannabis ever again, because I'm literally just going to be cultivating what I need specifically, It would be great if the model turned out that way. But not everyone's a grower, and not everybody's, an extractor, and a lot of people don't have this knowledge. So the dispensary systems will flourish, but that's really what it comes down to. That's where they justify it. Well, if we give people the right to grow, then we're going to lose a ton of money,
Right.
You could argue both sides of the coin either way. So.
There's a lot of arguments to be had there. But, we saw New York talk about not allowing a home grow. Ontario just, their core system just said it was unconstitutional to not allow a home grow. So now they're going to allow a home grow. But remarkably, they were one of the only provinces that would not allow a home grow when it first rolled out. What's interesting about the Delaware bill here is that, they're looking at a 3-year rollout before anybody can literally put a plant in the ground and grow. Do you think that's going to be fast enough? Do you think we talked about it last week about what structures need to be put in place and how long it can take on a state level, even a federal level, to get from, hey, we're legal to an actual system in place. 3 years, though, isn't that a lot of time?
I mean, let's think of it in the sense of Vermont, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say, all of a sudden a recreational bill gets passed and we have a tax and regulate system, okay? There's no way that there's enough supply of cannabis in Vermont currently right now to take care of just the state itself, let alone the demand that's going to come from all the people who are like, well, Vermont's got great craft beer. I'm sure they got great craft cannabis. Let's go on vacation, get some of that great craft cannabis. And,
right.
It's just, I don't think it's going to, it's 3 years. It seems a little lengthy, but it's going to take that time for everything to catch up in a sense. Unless there's growers that are growing a insane amount of cannabis right now that nobody knows about, like in Vermont, because there's no way that anybody would be, that model actually goes for any state, really.
Right.
I look at what Oregon went through. At first, Oregon didn't have enough to do what it wanted, and it was supply and demand, and then the state was like, well, we'll open it wide open. And then now they're sitting on 350 million metric tons of cannabis they can't sell.
Right.
So 6 1, half a dozen the other, right? In the beginning, it's going to be a slow go. Where you need to kind of regulate is that whole area where it's like, okay, we got the surplus, and we know that this is enough to get us through the next 6 months. Okay, let's try and move that surplus while the growers are catching up. And once that happens, once that cycle happens, then, and it could take 24 to 36 months for that to happen. Most growers' rule is usually starts in 3, because they'll grow 3 plants.
Right.
And, it's like a safety precaution in a sense. Yeah, 2's great, but what happens if you lost one or one went down? Then the other one will be there as a backup. So you're always trying to keep it in that 3 type of rotation, if you will. And that all, if it's within the year cycle, I'm fortunate enough that I would be able to pretty much grow year round being in Arizona. I know you guys can do that in Vermont, but you could grow indoor year round. So, yeah.
So here's a good question that somebody brought to me this weekend, which I was actually pretty interested by. The question was, now this was in reference to plant counts, because we were discussing the new proposals on many of these states. Some of them are plant count based, some of them are now considering square footage, right? So now, so hypothetically speaking, say you're a patient, you have a plant count of 6 or 4. It seems to be like most states are 4 to 6 within a vegetative stage, right, and then 2 to 4 in a flowering stage, and some medical patients may get more than that, right? But now, so the question and the concern came to me is that these people are going out there buying high quality seeds, right? And we've discussed seeds here a bit on the show. And the differences between seeds, which we should touch base on here, so people understand. There's a feminized, there's non-feminized, and the process that they have to go through to become feminized. You know what I mean? So there's different options out there, but and I think some people get confused. I mean, a lot of people go for the feminized seeds because they think every seed they're going to pop is going to be feminized, which is the ideal situation. But as we all know, that's not necessarily the case. So now, say a patient goes out to a dispensary, buys some non-feminized, top dollar seeds, whatever they have to offer, or where they get it from, and say they pop 6 of them and only 2 of them are females. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Shouldn't there be more of allotment in a flowering stage? That way you can actually pull, strong plants and make sure that you can really work your medicine properly, and then make sure that, you're not coming down with males and having these issues where, you could take out, a big chunk of your medicine during a grow period if you have these issues. So,
right.
Is that something that we should consider in this? Is this something that no one's ever really thought about? I mean, when it was proposed to me, I was like, wow, that's a great question. And we as growers know growers that are, they are, searching for that strain. You know what I mean? They're doing they're pheno hunting, as we like to call it within the industry, right? So when you pheno hunt, you never know what you're going to get. You kind of, it's a crapshoot. We like to say it's like a 50-50 is what you want to kind of base yourself on. But what happens when these guys are buying these seeds? You know what I mean? Obviously, that's probably why there's a higher flowering count than there is or a higher veg count than there's a flower count. But, in these situations, should this be considered, especially for patients? I thought it was a great question.
No, it definitely is. That's like the guy who's on the internet, and he's searching for here's one, like the Godbud. I would search for Godbud seeds. I love Godbud. Now, let's say if I didn't really have experience in cannabis at all, and, I was looking at this, but I had talked to my buddies and whatnot, and they're like, oh, these are autoflower seeds. Yeah, let's use these. Those are guaranteed females, right? I mean, because you are right. There is a falsity around that fact in the cannabis world, if you will, for people that are up and coming. They think that automatically these seeds have been engineered to be female.
Yeah.
Nobody really tells you that these plants can turn to hermaphrodites. Nobody tells you that, you could have males. It is possible. It does happen. Nobody ever says that. These people just go, okay, this is what it is. This is what I'm going to do. Now, let's say, and I mean, I've seen this happen, where people will grow cannabis and they have seeds in their cannabis. Mm-hmm. And it's actually, the plants turn out to be pretty decent, okay? Mm-hmm. And now, they'll be like, they get all excited, and they're like, oh, those are my autoflower seeds. Those are guaranteed now to be females. And I'm like, how do you know that?
Right.
What guarantee do you have, And we could talk about this for so long, just because there's so many different ways that you could go about, what's the word I'm looking for? The correct word, I should say, justifying the fact that these are all going to be female plants. Okay. People that are really making genetics like Subcool, they know, because they've been doing it for 30 years. Okay, there's a reason why their plants are so renowned and of such a high medical quality. Okay, so I mean, if you start out with decent genetics like that, a lot of people think, hey, these plants are going to do what I was told that they're going to do, and they might.
Well, that's not always a guarantee either, though, right?
No, that's not. You really got to know. You really got to kind of study the whole cannabis plant, and, read and really know what it does, how it reacts, what it looks like, the simple telltale signs. You got to know about so many things. What if you get mites? What if you have insects? What insects are good? What insects are bad? You know what I mean? How do you fight pesticide-type issues and mold-type issues and all this stuff that could be in an outer environment that all these plants are exposed to? And if you're trying to do this from a medicine standpoint, I mean, how many people are going to have a really cool, white little zip room where all their medicine's being grown and they're being extremely careful and, extremely clean about it and everything? That's pretty difficult, you know?
Right. I mean, again, you know, what's interesting, and we talk about this all the time, is, you know, again, in the news today, there's 4 times the hemp being grown in America right now within last year alone. I mean, this is last year. This isn't over a couple of years, but there's 4 times the amount of hemp being grown in the country over 1 year. So it means obviously there's a shift to hemp. Now, we talk about it a lot. You know, there's articles about the boom and how it's going to keep exploding. There's articles about, you know, the balloon is going to pop. You know what I mean? A great article that, I read this week was, you know, they compared it to the almond industry. It raised a lot of great questions, you know what I mean, about, you know, all the farmers rushing out and changing their whole everything to support a new crop that, you know, will it succeed or not in your state? We talk about it a lot, saying that, yeah, the demand's there. You know what I mean? Everything's going to need CBD. Everything's looking for hemp. Once the fiber products come in, and we can start manufacturing more and more of that within the country, we're going to see a huge need for that, especially with like hempcrete, the plastics, the biodegradable stuff that they can make. I mean, you know, they're making everything from Legos to straws to silverware to, you know, pretty soon you're going to see it impact our whole restaurant market too. You know what I mean? To-go bags, everything's going to be made out of hemp. Why? Because it biodegrades in 30 days and it holds its structure for a couple of weeks. So whether you get it wet or not, so it's like better than a paper bag. And still better than a paper bag, you know what I mean? And biodegrade naturally. So, with all this, I think we're going to see a lot of products just get switched over. I mean, because of the excitement of the product, you know, hey, why can't we make this out of hemp plastic? You know what I mean? And start getting away from chemicals. You know what I mean? Lots of crazy.
I mean, I'm a huge advocate for it. I really am. You know, and I think that's exactly. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see article after article after article. This building was made out of hemp. This plane was made out of hemp. This car was made out of hemp. This, like, pretty much you can make anything out of that fiber.
Well, the thing with, I mean, with hemp too. I mean, a lot of people. A lot of the news that we see and hear today is news about how, you know, a lot of this is so new. The new technology, we have to test this and do some more research on that. And then you look 80 years ago, probably even more now. I think in the 30s, you know, Henry Ford built a car completely made out of hemp that ran on hemp. Which is, you know, obviously way before its time, but it exists. It's out there. You know what I mean? So we've seen it in the automotive industry. We're seeing it everywhere. Like you said, a great article, you know, what was it, a week or two ago about now they're manufacturing planes using hemp parts, which is great. The one thing I'd love to find out is, you know, is this product, you know, how strong can it be? You know what I mean? I'd love to talk to an engineer or something like that. I mean, we had Elucidation on the show months ago here now, and maybe Scott and that crew could give us a call here today. But, you know, what is the strength value compared to like a carbon fiber or like just a general plastics? I mean, if again, I mentioned Legos. If people don't know, Legos is making the transition to make all their products out of hemp. So here in a few years, you're going to see all Legos being made out of hemp. And these plastic Legos will become collectibles, you know. So it's an interesting thing. And like, you know, you see Levi's jeans moving to a hemp. They now have a processing way that makes the clothing more comfortable to wear. I don't know if you know, a lot of the hemp clothing and stuff usually will get mixed in with or blended in with another fabric to make it a little bit more suitable for daily wear. I have a pair of the hemp Adidases. They're stiff. I'm not going to lie. They're great. I love them. But as technology is evolving and the more work we get with this plant, we're realizing that, you know, pretty soon we'll be able to make toilet paper out of hemp, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're going to be able to make everything out of it. And it grows, I mean, in 3 months, boom, you know, and it's a whole new cycle.
Right.
And it's a whole new, you know, and let's take the farmer who's got the 100-acre farm, okay? And now let's say you're growing hemp for fiber. It's all fiber. It's nothing. I mean, at this point, it's probably just textile, literally, okay? And let's say you split it up so every month you get it to a point where every month, basically, you are flipping 25 acres. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could do it. If you timed it right, you could literally do it where your quarters match up for every 3 months, and you could just keep rotating. So while you're planting one, you're harvesting one, and the next one's ready to go. And it just keeps in that cycle. You just keep going. You just keep rotating around that square, basically.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, now you have constant residual income. And, you know, you're all you're doing is literally planting, growing, and farming hemp as much as you can, as often as you can, just like wheat or anything else. But the price of this commodity is going to be ridiculous, you know. And then, because I see in the future hemp going back on the open market, just like anything else. It's going to, you know, just like bacon or frozen concentrated orange juice or anything else. It's going to be a commodity. It's going to be something that's traded. And I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't fall into every one of those categories, in a fiber, in a textile, whatever it is. Like, it's going to happen.
When we talk about it, should it be labeled as a commodity? Should it be sold as a commodity? Should it be treated ultimately like a commodity? You know what I mean? Where
it was before. I mean, why change the model? Once again, you know, I feel like it beat a dead horse here. From 1937 to 1946, you were required to grow hemp in the United States as an American citizen. Like, how easily we forget all these things that we were already doing. Once again, the Constitution is printed on hemp paper. Like, the whole United States was nothing but hemp.
Right, which is phenomenal to think, because we don't talk about that much. You know what I mean? It's like literally our founding fathers were dressed in, used paper from, had farms. You know, wasn't it George Washington that had a hemp farm? I mean, there's lots of history of presidents within hemp and building this hemp empire up.
And cannabis.
Right. I mean, we talk about how, you know, the medicines that were being used with cannabis products within it. And then, you know, I mean, maybe we don't touch on it enough, the shift in the 1930s, basically, with Reefer Madness, the hemp thrashing machines, the Hearst publication companies. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realized how much money, politics, and government played into this, which, you know, we talk about a lot now when we see what happened there. But, you know, I mean, it wasn't like this was a dangerous plant. It still isn't, right? It's not killing anybody. Which will lead us to another conversation. So if somebody want to call in and question a few things, I mean, obviously we have the vape cart issues, which is something I want to touch base on. But actually, it's time to take a break. The show's flying right now, guys. It's 12:36. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to bring Brandon Barberio back with his strain of the week. Really excited to hear this one this week, guys. So don't go anywhere. Again, you tuned in to WGDR Plainfield, WGDH Hardwick. This is 91.1 FM and 91.7. And if you guys want to live stream us, you can take us anywhere with you on any of your devices, www.wgdr.org. And here is Brendan Barberio with Cronuts.
I'm Brandon Barberio, your cannabis expert from the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio on WGDR. This week's strain of the week is the Cronuts. The Cronuts is a super rare indica dominant hybrid strain that was created by crossing the infamous Girl Scout cookie with the potent Sun City Kush. This powerful combination results in a tasty smoke with THC levels in between 15 to 20% on average. The Cronuts has a flavor of a fresh, sweet, woody, and delicious overtones of light, earthy spice, yet floral. It's very pleasant to behold. The Cronuts hit you high and hard in the body, but yet light in the head. And this is great for long-terming effects if you're trying to get stuff done around the house. You'll feel a relaxing body high that will wash over you first, dropping you into a state of nice calm. And as the effects grow, all of a sudden the euphoria and your creativity infuses, and it makes it feel very easy. The combination with these high THC levels are great for dealing with patients who are dealing with Crohn's disease, gastrointestinal disorder, eye pressure, headaches, chronic pain, and depression. This bud has a very tight, olivey nug with amber hairs and a frosty covering of crystals. Once again, I'm Brandon Barberio, your cannabis expert for In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio on WGDR.
Cronuts, man. You sound really excited about that one this week. I gotta slow you down, man.
It's so funny, like, at the end, you know, when I'm putting the strain of the week together, and I look at the picture of the bud, and I'm, like, literally in my head, like, thinking, how do I describe this to the public? Like,
right.
Is that brown? Is it more of an olive? Are they amber? Is it, you know what I mean? I'm like, how do I give the best description of this without, you know, literally just posting a picture of it up or something? Like, it's kind of funny, but it's totally the truth.
Right. Right. So,
but yeah,
I mean, it's a great strain. I'm not gonna lie. Definitely have that.
So Cronuts, the reason that this one really kind of stood out for me was the whole digestive system, all the aid to the digestive system medically. And I know that there's a lot of people out there with Crohn's that are always looking for specific medical strains to help deal with that. It's not something that's easy to come by, and unfortunately, those types of strains are either grown privately, as we know. You know, they're really hard to come by. So hopefully in the future, those will be the type of strains where I can call you and be like, Joe, I got some Cronuts. You want to trade me for some Plur Bud? And, we'll, just different strains so that you have different things in your garden to combat different illnesses.
Right.
So.
No, definitely. I hear that. It sounds like a great strain. I love it. And speaking of strains, now I'm not. I know how we shift gears all over the place here on the show, especially when we go live, because me and you, there's so much to talk about, and we listen to our listeners. So when we get a listener message, which you guys can message us on Facebook, you can find us on Instagram, you can find us on Twitter. But we are live on Facebook right now. If you guys want to find us there, you can go right to our Facebook page, In the Weeds. You can see us in studio here. Well, just me. Brandon's out in Arizona. So great question. Mary Jane Sarvis had put up on our video. She wants to know a little bit more about ruderalis plants. Ruderalis plants, as we know, are a little different than your typical sativa or your typical indica, and they actually have different style of leaves, which also help identify it pretty easily. So, Brandon, about ruderalises, though.
Ruderalis cannabis. Yeah, you're hitting me hard, because that's one I just don't know a lot about. It's something that I never really studied into, because I've always grouped it basically as a hybrid, even though it's really not.
Right, I think
technically.
Yeah, I think typically it gets put in that hybrid form. A lot of times you'll see like things on the internet that'll show you like an indica and a sativa and like a hybrid, and they'll put in the little hyphenations of ruderalis, right? So what I know about the ruderalis is it's more commonly a low THC variety of cannabis, okay? Like you said, it generally gets classified in the middle, so a lot of people look at it as a hybrid, from what I understand. Again, I'm not 100% sure on this. It may change, so if anybody wants to give us a call and has a comment on it, 802-454-7762. But anyways, it's a low THC variety of cannabis, typically put in a hybrid state. What's nice about this, and what we talk about, is a lot of people that I've talked to, and I actually had this conversation this week about a strain that hit 13 or 12 or 13% on tested this week, and how much the gentleman spoken to, which actually has been a guest on the show before, Thomas Marcom of Vermont Grow Coaching, was talking about how, for him personally, because he's a user, and a lot of the patients he deals with are really enjoying these strains because they're only like 12, 13% THC, right? So now the benefit from that, and a lot of people don't even think about it, because you know as well as I do, when we want to go get our cannabis, we want that best bang for our buck, right? We're looking for that 20 plus THC, knock me out or wake me up, make me shake kind of a strain, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, when you're medicating, is that really what you want? I mean, we talk about it a lot, using your sativas and your indicas and your hybrids at certain points and times of the day, which makes your ruderalis is really great because they're lower THC. So now it's a hybrid kind of a blend. It's a lower THC. So now when you smoke it, you can still function, right? You can smoke. A lot of people like to consume their cannabis with either a joint or a blunt, even with a pipe. So it's not like you're going to go take one or two hits. Some of these plants, right, one or two hits, they're going to rock you, right? So if you have to work, if you have to sustain, if you have to parent, if you have to do something where you don't want to be high, but it's kind of like that cigarette to you, you know what I mean? It's that calm. It makes you feel better without wrecking your day. You know what I mean?
This is I got a lot of information here to bestow upon you, actually. So check this out. It says cannabis ruderalis is actually mistaken as a hybrid, but what it actually really is a sativa subset. So there's a lot of people that are basically saying that this is like a subspecies of cannabis sativa. Mm-hmm. That's the closest. The botanists are saying that that's the closest thing it comes to. The reason we don't have a lot of information on it and why people are asking is because this strain is literally from Central and Eastern Europe and Russia. That's where it's actually grown. We've never even had it in the United States. The only cannabis that we've grown really in the United States that's logged have been sativa, then indica, obviously, and then hybrid. It says in the very beginning that the only cannabis that was ever really logged was sativa. There was no such thing as indica cannabis. There was no classification for it, just like ruderalis. There was no classification for it. But now, obviously, after studying the plant, and everything and whatnot, but you are totally right. This is actually more of a medical type strain. It does not have a super high THC, but it does do a lot for the human body and the endocannabinoid system.
Right. I mean, it does have a higher CBD levels than most plants. It's an interesting leaf. So people that normally know how to look at leaves and tell what a plant is, obviously a sativa has, like the longer, thinner type fan leaves on there, and there's typically 7 leaves.
What makes this a little bit more special, too, is these plants, if you will, when they hit their flowering stage, it's based on the maturity of the plant instead of the light cycle. So if we were growing a sativa and we wanted that plant to flower, we could drop it into a 12-12 cycle and it's going to flower. We can force it. Where this plant will automatically just do it based on, hey, I'm 90 days in, and now I know it's my time to flip to the next process.
Right. I mean, a lot of stuff goes back to ruderalis when it comes to the autoflowers too, because a lot of what they do with ruderalis is they breed them into certain strains to help get them to autoflower. So if you guys don't know much about autoflowering, basically, it's a much faster growing finishing plant. The problem with them is you can't really clone them, you know what I mean? So you get it, you pop it, you go, and you're done. That's it. A lot of these plants, we can extend their lives. We can extend their genetics. We can take cuts and clones, replant them, reroot them, and then here you go again. You have another plant. So you basically can feed the cycle. Unfortunately, autoflowers, you can't really do that. But they usually pretty much flower independently in about 2 to 4 weeks. So it's a lot faster than we're used to seeing in a regular growth cycles for most cannabis plants, right? So when you see something that's going that fast, and you're seeing a lot of these autoflowers, ruderalis are part of that. You know what I mean? It's a great way to do it because what it does is it helps control the size because these plants don't grow very big.
they're not a big tall bush. They're not going to grow out to be the 16-foot monster that people love to see on the internet. This is going to be a small bush. It's going to produce a heavy amount of yield, and that yield's going to be quick, fast. So if you guys want to turn products over, but again, it's not something that you're going to be able to clone and keep going. So hopefully we answered the question all right, because that was a great question that we don't talk enough about, because just another kind of extension of a cannabis plant that, we talk about hybrids and like you said, sativas and indicas, and we're realizing in this day and age that it's not really the proper way to talk about cannabis, because there's so many other ways that it affects people, because we talk about people like ADHD and how cannabis works with them. Typically a lot of what people say is it has opposite effects. So a lot of people just need to try these strains. These guys will give you kind of the same feel and relaxation or whatever you're looking for, but isn't necessarily hybrid. I mean, how many plants? How many times have you seen a certain strain get called a hybrid, an indica, and a sativa?
Right. I mean, how many times do I do the strain of the week? And if I'm looking for information, it'll show me, oh, this is a 60-40, so it's an indica dominant. That's the terminology now. It's a sativa dominant, or it's indica dominant hybrid. I mean, I can't tell you. I've never seen somebody be like, oh, this is a ruderalis hybrid. Like, no, of course they're not going to say that. Like,
right, but now. We still kick these descriptions around. Are they right? I mean, we talked about the Phylos Galaxy stuff last week a little bit,
right?
And what they were trying to do, and I think that proves to the effect that the indica sativa hybrid branding of certain strains is not always going to be accurate. I mean, obviously, within certain strains, there's strong phenos, and there's not so good phenos, and there's phenos that propose different things. And then, even with the growing, we realize that, the longer you let that plant grow, what does it do, Brandon? It changes its...
I mean, you're absolutely right. To answer the question, I guess, no. The real answer is no. Because the information changes in cannabis so much, so quickly, because it's like the child that comes down, for Christmas morning to open the presents. And just imagine if that happened like every day for the next 10 years until we finally caught up with all this information. Like, that's how it is. Mm-hmm. It changes so much. It's like, well, we know about CBD. Oh, yeah? You ever heard of CBD?
Right.
And then, 2 weeks later, you know how to make CBN? And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Dude, I was just, really? Yeah. Oh, man. Or like last week, well, what about decarboxylation? And using these heating methods in order to create better CBN from the THC. And it's like, we didn't know about that stuff a couple months ago, but all these scientific studies keep coming out, and we keep getting this brand new information. Maybe it'll never really stop. I mean,
well, does it ever? In any sort of field, it always just keeps kind of going and going and going. You find new uses, you find new information as technology.
Well, yeah, eventually there's all, the plant can only do so much, if you will. Like we can only figure out so much about everything that's involved. So once that's finished, then the next process would be, all right, how do we maximize this to the best of our ability? Now that we know everything we need to know about it. But we're all just starting to find out about all this stuff, and I mean, still, like Dr. Uthe says, dude, 86% of the medical community doesn't even understand what an endocannabinoid system is. They don't even know that we have it. Right. So how do you literally teach people about that when, from the doctor's perspective, that's got to be a pretty difficult speech if you're among colleagues who are all doctors. That's got to be a hard sell in a second, because the doctors have to be sitting there going, well, how come we weren't taught this from the get-go? Like, right. Why didn't we learn about the stuff? I know what the lymphatic system is. You know what I mean? I know all about the lymphatic system. So why didn't we learn about this when we were in medical school? Like, how come this is just coming out now?
Well, if I was a doctor, and we
talk about this a lot. It's interesting to see, if you're a doctor and you spend all this money, you spend 15 years in medical school, learn all this stuff to be top of your game, to realize that they lie to you about a whole. It's not even like a one little thing. It's like a whole industry. It's almost a game changer in many aspects. You know what I mean? Something that could have been really utilized for the last 80 plus years. Within our community, within the medical community at most. You know what I mean? How do you trust? It's like basically it's kind of like the government or whatever. How do you trust the institution that's been lying to you your whole life? We talk about this with stigmas. You know what I mean? And here it is right in our own medical community, which is affecting the lives of how many millions of people?
I mean, how many lives have literally could have been saved from all the different forms of cancer that could have been cured from just THC and CBD and all of its components alone, that we could have been leaps and bounds in medical knowledge. You know what I mean? Had this been just an ongoing process, and let's say it never really did, never really did make a fall and all that, like, it would still, everything would pretty much be flourishing. And it would be absolutely amazing, because it would be very easy for people to just, okay, no problem. We'll just, take care of this, and you're going to use this topical, and we're going to get you on the CBD regimen. It's high volume, and smoke this strain. This is for the morning. This is for the night. And yeah, we would have it broke down into real medicine. You know what I mean? Because we're just breaking the ice on that whole thing too. Cannabis and medicine. Like, that's just, we're at the tip of the iceberg with that.
So now,
and as we go down, more and more, it's going to get better.
So now we're talking about medicine. This is something that I've been itching to talk about, because this just kind of blew my mind, especially with, the way the whole medical industry seems to be moving right now. It's all positive. But, and we read it on the Can News today, the UK Health Institute rejects CBD as an epilepsy treatment, which is very interesting to me, because if you read the article, and there wasn't a huge article on this, and I'm going to try to find some more articles on it, basically, they proved that cannabidol works with this clobazam, which is what they put in Epidiolex, which makes this more ironic. So let me get this up before I lose my thought here. But they basically, the UK Health Institute has basically proven that cannabidol with clobazam works, right, to reduce seizure frequencies, right? But they're going to not support it because its long-term effects are unknown, right? So here we are. We have the test, right? This is the test that everybody's been waiting for. This is the research that everybody's been wanting. So they get the research. It comes back positive. Everything's okay. But we got to study it for 10 more years. I understand long-term effects, cause and effects, stuff like that. And we want to make sure that, people are safe, and that this won't have, in 3 years, we won't start seeing people suffering from these other weird health issues like we're seeing with, like, the vape carts and I'll say vape carts and e-cigarettes and even the cannabis-based products that are not good out there that we talk about a lot. But with this blew me away. You know what I mean? Because again, it's like, everyone's is blaming the lack of research. They do the research, they find it works, and then they ban it anyways. What's interesting about this article is, and clobazam is, it's within the one of two products that are okayed in the United States to be used, and have been taken off the Schedule 1 list. It's Epidiolex, right? So GW Pharmaceuticals owns Epidiolex and produces Epidiolex, but a lot of people, I guess, don't realize that they're not only using a straight CBD product, they're actually adding this clobazam to it. I'd like to do a little bit more research on clobazam, but, it works. You know what I mean? Obviously, the government is taking it off a Schedule 1 list. The UK has proven that it works. Now we're just talking about long-term effects that it might have on people. So, but again, how do you feel about this? Like, this was one.
I'm just going to come right out and say it because that's usually what I do, but...
Well, let me let you think about that, too, because I'm going to throw one more thing at you. They even had Professor David Uthe, which is the head of the Center for the Neuropsychopharmacology at Imperial College in London, right? He says CBD by itself isn't particularly effective, right, for treating epilepsy syndromes. Now, this is another thing that we have to talk about in this country, because with the legality of THC, I guess you could say, that's, not being legal, most of the successful outcomes of people that have epilepsy have come from the use of cannabis oil that also contains THC or THCV, which, like we're just talking, there's a lot of other cannabinoids that really work well for people. So they find that these tests work great as long as it has THC in it. So now here we go with more tests, more results, more doctors saying that, hey, THC and THCV and CBD are what we need. How do we get that to patients? How's that going to work, man? Especially in these states where, a lot of it's illegal. We just saw Washington, for instance, is pulling off CBD edibles off the shelves. We've seen this in a lot of other states. So now they're pulling all the edibles off the shelves in Washington again. So where do we draw this line?
Okay, so a lot of information, but let's go back a little bit. The reason, so they admit they know it works. We know it works. Okay, everybody's in agreement on that. So they're going to shelve it. And they're shelving it on the fact of, oh, my God, all these after effects. There's no after effects. We know there's no after effects. So if you use CBD oil for the next 5 years, what are the after effects? Don't worry, I'll wait. Because there are none. It's oil. That's the whole point. That's why it's getting shelved, because it works. It undermines the pharmaceutical company and the medical institution 150%. That's, now on the other side of it, like Washington, oh, well, don't put CBD in edibles and this and that, blah, blah, blah. I think that there's a lot of fake products out there. We know for a fact there's a lot of fake products out there. I think that there could purposely be a lot of fake products being put out on purpose. There are two sides to the war. Not everybody loves cannabis. There are prohibitionists out there that are like, we can make these vape carts and put those out. And, people have been smoking cigarettes for a really long time. The tobacco companies really lose sleep over how many hundreds of thousands of people they're killing a year? No. So, the same thing. If you want to take down the industry, how do you do it? Very easily. You target the one thing that nobody wants, the biggest taboo subject there is, children. And when it comes to any type of product, yeah, that's an easy slam dunk right there. So in between the fake products and the fact that it works, there you go. That's enough for me. That's why they, This is one of those things where it's a case scenario where it's like, it's so easy and it works so well that if everybody was doing it, everybody would be healthy. Well, then why aren't they in some form or another using some form of cannabis in their diet in order to just regulate their endocannabinoid system, basically?
Right. Well, when we talked to Dr. Bob had a lot of insight on it. And, again, it does have tons of medical benefits, but like anything, if you focus one specific part of, your health, whether it's a diet, whether it's working out, whether it's something else, but you're not doing the other few things, does it work? You know what I mean? If you're trying to lose 50 pounds and you're going to change your diet, will you lose weight? Yeah, sure, you may lose a little bit of weight, but exercise is you need that as well, right? So I think a lot of it is where people don't do that. There are people trying to medicate to have other issues, like Dr. Bob was saying when he was on the show. A lot of it to him is a mental issue too. Having a clean mental mind would be what you need. But anyways, guys, it is time to top of the hour. We got to do the call. We got
our lawyers calling in from Vermont Cannabis Solutions. So don't go anywhere, guys. We're going to be right back. This is WGDR Plainfield, WGH Hardwick, Gar College Community Radio, 91.1 FM and 91.7. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get right with a little PSA.
Hey, young America, we need to talk. You may think this is uncool. You may even think it is bogus. But I want to tell you about something that has everyone buzzing. Something that concerns mature boys and girls just like you. Something called grass. Not that grass. I'm talking about marijuana. You may have heard of it. You may have seen someone smoking it, like those burnout bohemians or that crazy-eyed custodian at your school. You may have taken a toke or two. But do you know the whole story? Do you know the blunt truth? Weed, grass, ganja, joint, doobie, do, chronic, ace, lobo, loco, love boat, bud, buddha, blunt, pot, pat, pin, chiba, 420, and hashish, or hash for short. No matter what you call it, no matter what hip street live it's referred or referred to by, it all comes from the same stash. It's all marijuana. I know what you're thinking. What is marijuana? What makes marijuana so dangerous? Where can I get some marijuana? Well, brother, I'm not going to nickel and dime you. I'm not like the man all you kids are rebelling against. I'm hip. I know what young people are dealing with these days. In fact, here are some of my free-thinking friends to prove how completely not square I really am.
Parents are hypocrites. They tell us one thing, but then they do another. Why don't they practice what they preach?
Adults never have time to listen to us. And when they do, they just don't do what we're saying. Why can't we dress the way we want in school?
So what about grass? Let's start with the basics. Marijuana is a plant that grows best with plenty of water and sunlight. Its leaves extend outwards in a star pattern some say resembles a hand, an open palm reaching out to claim its next victim. Rolled in zigzags, or puffed from 7th period woodshop projects, the smoke from this plant causes a brief state of euphoria, immediately followed by permanent insanity. Users are prone to unpredictable behavior, including junk food binges, joyride, and a sudden urge to wear sunglasses at night.
Marijuana should be made legal. Now!
Plus, they look flat out crazy. You there! Stop laughing. Laughing is a symptom caused by blowing pot. Take a good look at yourself. Are you addicted? Are your eyes half shut and bloodshot? Do you recognize that person in the mirror? Then blame it all on marijuana. Long-term use of marijuana can lead to a psychological dependency. Soon, you'll be taking all sorts of measures to get your fix. People will start calling you names like pothead or Smoky McBongwater. Losing all motivation, it's likely that you will drop out of school, take a sudden liking to sitar music, and maybe even get felt up by a cop or two. So why smoke grass?
I took it on a dare.
And if I dared you to jump off a cliff, would you do that too?
Man, everybody blows pot.
I know this one guy that doesn't. Wait, not that guy. This guy.
Oh, no, thank you. Not for me.
When I'm high, it enhances my creativity.
No, it doesn't. Look at these paintings. The artist was stoned when he painted these. Those don't look like real flowers. Is marijuana really where it's at? Is it really as righteous as you think? There is more to life than grass. There are fulfilling careers and groovy beach parties. The closer you look, the more seeds you find in your stash. Follow your hopes and dreams. Be someone. Do yourself and your country a favor. Don't let this happen to you.
Sometimes you catch that funky breeze. You're in the weeds.
All right, and we are back, guys. You are tuned in to WGDR Plainfield, WGDH Hardwick. This is Guard College Community Radio. This is Joseph Smith and my lovely co-host, the one and only Brandon Barberio, who's joining us from Arizona. So a big shout out to him. Again, thank you for tuning in with us. And on the phone, we have one of our favorite people in the world, Timothy Fair from Vermont Cannabis Solutions. Timothy.
Well, hello, Joe, and that was very nice of you. Thank you very much.
So
the feeling is mutual.
Right. So we were talking a little bit before the show, and, there's a lot of weird things happening. I was asked a funny question, and maybe you can shed some insight on this just from a legality standpoint. And I know it's something that isn't going to be probably something that's ever going to change. But me and Brian touched base about it earlier, and it was about a friend of mine who said, I'm a patient. We're in Vermont. You know what I mean? He's allowed X amount of plants and flower and X amount of plants and veg, right? So his question was, I'm buying these seeds, and the seeds come in, and, I don't know what I'm going to get. You know what I mean? If for some reason I run 6 plants and only 2 pop and are male or are female, and the other 4 are male, I'm kind of screwed. You know what I mean? It's like, is there anything that they can do beyond that? And, my explanation was, pretty soon that we're going to see a square footage type of arrangement instead of a count arrangement, right? But, as we were talking today, most of the states are still based on plant counts, correct?
That is correct. A lot of the states have, instituted a numerical plant count, but Vermont is not. Hasn't even really considered that. I think they considered it early on and dismissed it for, the square footage.
Right. So, I mean, for us here in Vermont, we're looking at a potential square footage arrangement. So that would greatly help people in these situations where they're trying to grow or a lot of people, as we call, pheno hunt. You know what I mean?
Correct.
So within this situation, people will be okay. But, the question kind of came up with concern because, obviously we had a medical patient here in Vermont not too long ago who was recently acquitted of the charges, but, we got in trouble for, what was it, 1 plant over the...
1 plant over the limit. And technically wasn't acquitted. The prosecutor's office decided to drop the charges before trial.
Nice. So... And all right, now on this situation, let's talk about this a little bit because obviously, that kind of shocked a few people around the state, obviously, patients and people are concerned that are trying to work these things. Hey, what happens if I buy a 10-pack of seeds? I can only pop how much? You know what I mean? So, we discuss every county is different, right?
Right.
Now that the case is I guess over for you, I guess my question is, how was the response from the community to this certain issue? Were they kind of like, hey, was it something they wanted to push and make a statement of it, or was it something that they actually were just like, oh, this isn't even worth our time? This is kind of.
You mean when you say from the community? Do you mean the cannabis community or?
Well,
community at large?
I guess I would mention the community, not from the cannabis community, but from the justice side of the community. You know what I mean? Like the people that were bringing these charges up. Obviously there was charges made, but the response from like the judicial level, I guess you would say, because obviously everybody's looking at this going, we're seeing all these issues across the state here in Vermont and multiple other states, right? Where it doesn't really seem fair for, some people to get away with certain things and others not to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you really raised an excellent question, and that is, how was the perception of this from, say, the prosecutorial standpoint, the judicial system standpoint? And I would say there was a growing frustration, both from the judges involved in this matter and, honestly, the prosecutor. There were a couple of times in which it was made abundantly clear that this was at the absolute low end of the totem pole in terms of priority. I sense a little bit of even frustration on the part of the prosecutor for having to move forward with this prosecution. Where you are seeing a actual, real passion for these prosecutions and these busts and these arrests, as you could probably guess, law enforcement. Mm-hmm. That's where a lot of this is coming from. So law enforcement is vigorously pursuing these cases. The relationship between the state's attorney's office, the prosecutors, and the police, from an outsider looking in, I'm a defense attorney, but from an outsider looking in, it's a very interesting relationship. They have a very close relationship. And in a lot of times, officers who are very gung-ho on any particular case, any particular prosecution, The prosecutor will go along with that as long as there is a valid, route forward for the prosecution in order to appease the officer, in order to stay on good terms with law enforcement. There's definitely some of that give and take there. And, I can't help but think that, not only that one particular case in Bennington County, but a couple recent ones in Chittenden County as well, in which the prosecutors were half-heartedly prosecuting the cases to appease the investigating officer, knowing full well that these were going to resolve for something very, very, very minor, thankfully. And, as a defense attorney, it's kind of frustrating because, for me, I enjoy the fight. I enjoy getting a good outcome for our clients. I enjoy, winning when we deserve to win. The prosecutors, it's an easy prosecution. They don't give much time or effort into it. But the people who are being most impacted by this are the poor defendants, are the ones who are actually terrified. They think they're facing felony charges. Most of them have no experience in the criminal justice system. They don't know what to expect. And for doing something completely harmless that's not hurting anybody, that in a lot of times is actually helping people, they are now arrested. Now, usually cited into court, but the police can often bring them back to the station for fingerprints and photographs. They'll be released. And not many people are going to be held simply because of low-level cannabis offense. But being put through the ringer of the judicial system is a nightmare. A lot of times it will result in a probation sentence, which probation will be doing UAs. People who may use cannabis for medical purposes are told they can no longer do so. The ramifications of this are insane. And what is so frustrating from the defense attorney's point of view is that the whole process is going to appease the ego of some gung-ho prohibitionist, anti-marijuana law enforcement officer. And that is unbelievably frustrating. There's no public danger. There's no risk. There's no harm. There's no anything. There is simply the ego of some state trooper or local law enforcement officer who's gotten it into his or her head that the cannabis is a dangerous drug. And that's a lie. And we all know that. There's, absolutely no truth to it. And so when I see people whose lives are completely upended and in some cases really seriously negatively impacted because of that, there's in lies a lot of my frustration with the current state of affairs here.
It's very true. I mean, we have that in all kind of law anywhere within police, right? What I was going to say is recently I've seen to talk to a lot of people that paradigm shift I think is coming. You know what I mean? Where some of these police are medicating now. You know what I mean? Some of these police are on the sides of the people, I guess you could say, on this issue.
And Joe, and I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush. I am in no way, shape, or form saying all law enforcement officers are like this. And I think you're absolutely right. More and more, we're starting to see organizations like Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. These are, and most law enforcement officers they're fantastic people. I know a lot personally from my years as a criminal defense attorney. We don't always agree, but they're good people. They're not monsters. They're not horrible. Most law enforcement officers are there to do a good job, and they do put their lives on the line, and we're thankful for that. What I'm talking about is the subsection of law enforcement officers, like subsection of any profession, who have lost sight of the purpose of what law enforcement was intended to do, and instead have had this narrow laser focus on these important issues that I'm the marijuana guy, I'm the weed guy, I made more marijuana bucks than anybody, and that type of mentality is just, it's reprehensible. It's reprehensible for the life it destroys, and it's reprehensible for the fissure between the community and law enforcement that it creates.
Now, my question is, I think this is a great question. It just hit me, and I have a little backup for it. Shouldn't law enforcement be able to use cannabis? I mean, we're talking about, soldiers and PTSD.
I think we see a lot less domestic violence incidents amongst law enforcement officers. Probably see a lot less suicides amongst law enforcement officers as well.
Right, because, like you talked about, it's not an easy job. And in some states, cities, and in areas, these guys are under probably more stress or just as much stress as anybody, going to a war.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, but the thing that made me enjoy this is, there's a province in Canada that has lifted a ban for their officers against
CBD. So like now they allow their officers to use CBD, which I think is great because not only does it give them the ability to understand what a lot of these patients are using it for, what we discuss every day about this plant, but now it's put in the hands of these guys that are that critical person in that making that decision on whether they're going to arrest somebody or kick somebody's door in or be like, hey guys, like this is ridiculous, let's go do something a little bit bigger, better. Now, talking about all these different things. Now, we're talking about arrests. We're talking about all these crazy things. And I want to go back to the most recent arrest in Burlington and charges being brought up because they're federal charges, right?
Yes.
So we touched on it last week and we kind of ran out of time and there was a lot going on. But I want to go back into this issue. You know what I mean? The owners have pled guilty, if I'm correct here, to the distribution charge. Now, we
hold on. Let me clarify this a little bit because there's a couple of prosecutions in Burlington. I don't want the wrong information getting out.
Right.
So what you're talking about is the Good Times Gallery individuals who were originally arrested for distribution of cannabis, some gun charges, and then had some obstruction charges based on conduct after the arrest. They have recently entered into a plea deal with the U.S. Attorney's Office. At least the lead defendant in the case, has entered into a plea agreement, which means that the government and his attorneys have agreed that this is what they're going to put before the judge. Mm-hmm. The judge, however, in the case still has the opportunity to either accept or reject that plea deal. So just because there's a plea deal in place right now, and there's a potential guilty plea going to be entered as a consequence of that plea deal, that has not occurred yet. And there is still a chance that the judge, in the case, I believe it's Judge Christina Rice, would have the option to refuse the deal, would turn down the deal, say, for whatever reason she wants, really, to not move forward with it. But, as a general rule, I would say in 80% of cases, judges do tend to go along with the plea deals that both sides have reached. But we're still waiting to see. That won't occur until November. In the other recent federal prosecution in Burlington, which is Riding High Skate Shop, that case has been no plea deals. In fact, it's very preliminary in that case. So nobody's pled guilty. Nobody has admitted anything. It's still in the pending phases.
So let me ask you a question on this, though, just so we can clarify with a bunch of people, because I've a lot of people, obviously, when both instances happened, which the earlier one was a few months ago, the Ryan High one was just recent, so Good Times was a little while ago. Everybody kind of lit up and was like, federal. Why are these being charged on a federal level?
Great question. And I would say that this is and it's a little bit worrisome, to be honest with you, from my perspective, a growing trend across the country. It is a double-edged sword. What you're seeing now is state-level prosecutions dropping off. Even states in which cannabis is still illegal, but hemp has been legalized, in states you wouldn't think of, like Georgia, Alabama, and Texas, you're seeing county state's attorneys and county district attorneys refusing to prosecute low-level cannabis offenses because it's impossible for their departments to distinguish between hemp and cannabis. You're seeing a less and less of a urge to prosecute on the state and local level. And we could talk a lot about why that is. I think a lot of times the state and local level prosecutors are elected, and the general public just really does not support the war on cannabis anymore. 66% of people in the most recent Gallup poll looking for legalization. Medical cannabis is in the 90s in terms of approval rate. You have to really find somebody who's against medical cannabis these days. Adult use is by far to a 2-to-1 margin supported. So at the local level, you're not seeing a strong push from the electorate who puts these people into power to prosecute cannabis. You're seeing a strong push from the electorate to prosecute opiates, to prosecute violence, to prosecute guns, to prosecute offenses that are truly causing harm. The federal level, whole different ballgame. They're appointees. They don't have to answer to anybody, and they can pursue their own agendas as they personally see fit. So you see the personal vendettas against cannabis much more at the federal level. They're justified because technically it's still a Schedule I controlled substance. And so what I think you're seeing is in the absence of the state prosecutions, the feds stepping in and prosecuting cases that a few years back they never would have been involved in. The Riding High case is a perfect example of a case that even just 5 years ago, the feds would never have gotten involved in that. You're talking about a 67 plant count allegation. I've seen the feds in past years turn down 100, 200 plant operations because they were too small.
Well, we had that recently with the Champlain Valley dispensary. I mean, it was almost 300 plants.
That's a whole different ball game. That gets into a lot of state affairs. That gets into who sits on the board of directors of the Champlain Valley dispensary. That has a lot to do with who has a vested interest in the financial success of the Champlain Valley dispensary, say investors who have dumped hundreds of thousands of dollars into it over the last 6 years, and that have spouses in high positions in our state government. There's a lot more going on with that one. We could talk all day about that. I'm talking about the on-the-ground prosecutions of innocent Vermonters like the Riding High case. This is a case that did not involve any firearms. This has involved a case that has no direct evidence of any sales to minors, merely just a lot of talk about it. This is a case that has no real instances of violence. This is a case that has no instances of other drugs being involved. And this is a case where the largest sale that the government is alleging in this matter is $60. $60. That's the big sale. That's the big one, boys. That's the big one we're getting. We got a sale for $60 worth of cannabis.
So and that's what's unique to the situation too, because I mean, when we discussed the Good Times arrest, I mean there was a weapon involved, so that automatically puts it on a federal level, right? Now, how does the Riding High get to the federal level without a handgun, without like large
federal
counts?
Over the sentencing guidelines, any amount of cannabis is illegal under federal law, which means that the U.S. Attorney's Office has the right, for the District of Vermont, has the right to prosecute any case which is a violation of federal law. Simple possession of cannabis is a violation of federal law. So theoretically, they could. Now, historically, the U.S. Attorney's Office takes cases for specific reasons. And this is the type of case that generally, in years past, would have been left to the state prosecutorial system to prosecute under state law. However, like I said, I can't help but feeling that because of the lack of state prosecutions, the feds are now trying to fill that gap, flex their muscles, show that cannabis really is still a legal, dangerous drug, and perpetuate the failed war on drugs in their own way. Then there are circumstances under which these cases I do feel should be prosecuted when there is violence, true violence, when there is a risk to the community, when there's firearms involved, when there are other hard, real drugs involved. Those are cases that I do support the prosecution of. But I could never, and nobody should support the prosecution of a cannabis-only case where there is no harm or risk to the community. Is the U.S. Attorney's Office justified in doing so? On a legal level, yes, they are. They believe that a federal crime is being committed, and they're pursuing a prosecution. That is their right. That is their prerogative. However, I just really question the allocation of resources.
Right.
That there are a lot more important things to be going after.
Now, I mean, and this is a great conversation. We're having this discussion in Vermont, but we bring this conversation up a lot, but not a lot of people do. We're paying attention to what's going on out west, right? Because, I mean, even we even went over it today on the news that in Sonoma County they shut down a 63,000 cannabis plant site.
I saw that. Yes.
The large, probably. I mean, I don't know if it's nationwide the largest, but for California, it's the largest bust, right? So, I mean, they are going. They are cracking down in California now, and for multiple reasons. We talk about, the tax revenues falling short. We're talking about, the illicit market's still pretty big out there, and we're seeing trickle effects all over the country, which is interesting. So, but the difference out there is they're using state police, correct?
Yeah. The prosecutors in California, California has to be looked at through its own lens. You're not just dealing with a entrenched black market in California. You are dealing with a 20-year, multi-generational gray to white market industry. You have to understand, since California legalized medical cannabis in the mid-'90s, they have been hands-off. They have let this industry develop. Now, there were some questionable things, but it was so lightly regulated, and there were so few laws put into place that the state just let the industry grow. It established cultivators, dispensaries, supply chains, distribution chains, and it was working fairly well. It had some serious problems. The environmental damage that was done by unregulated cultivators is atrocious, and there were certainly aspects of it that needed to be addressed. But for the most part, it worked pretty well, and it worked pretty well for 20 years. So as of adult use legalization, where the state not only imposed ridiculous state-level controls, but local municipal controls as well, sometimes which conflicted completely. You're not simply trying to just, get rid of a minor black market like you see here in Vermont. You're trying to eliminate a 20-year industry and replace it with something new and upgraded. So the challenges that California faces are unique. No other state, and I can say that with confidence, are going to have the same challenges that California does. And right now, they are taking a hard push against unlicensed, unregulated operations, whether it's cultivation or dispensaries, that are in violation of California state law. And the state prosecutors are on board with that. They're not going after legal. They're not going after permitted. They're not going after regulated. They're not going after the people who are in compliance. Those people are fine. They are really focused on doing everything possible to stamp out the black market, to stabilize their legal market, increase tax revenue, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
So that's why you're seeing such a emphasis on state enforcement in California.
Right.
It's a West Coast thing, too, right? I mean, that's solely because, for instance, I want to ask you something, Tim, and see what you think about this. With all the debauchery that's really gone down in the cannabis system in Vermont, with the dispensaries and, all the stories that we've covered, how do you feel about the federal government arresting the Falls River, Massachusetts mayor for allegedly extorting hundreds of thousands of dollars from cannabis businesses? I mean, he got arrested this morning. That literally just grabbed him right in his office. And they're like, hey, guess what, big guy?
Yep.
It's time to play.
And the funny thing is, it's his second time this year. Second time he's been arrested for allegedly extorting marijuana vendors for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and obviously it's all cash.
Right. Well, I mean, the entire community host agreement system in Massachusetts is now. Allegations are true, and I never believe allegations when somebody is arrested, especially by the federal government, especially as reported by the media. I would want to know the facts and the reality of what happened. What he was arrested for, if it was true. But if the allegations did end up being proved true, and if he did, in fact, embezzle, good. Because this is it. This is people who probably were prohibitionists to start with and threw up every roadblock as possible they could have to get this industry going. And then once it did get going, despite their best efforts, now they're going to turn around and try to rip it off and take advantage of it and steal money from it and steal money from patients. It's like the nabbing of the general fund here in Vermont from the medical program. And it's good. Those are the type of people who should be prosecuted, in my mind. Should be them sitting in jail, not the people using the substance for medicinal purposes.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, we've had a few guests on the show that have been part of these types of issues with Massachusetts, right, where they put a bunch of money in and they're sitting and waiting, and then they realize that that program is not going to get lifted off the ground. Where'd that money go? You know what I mean?
Great question.
So, thank you for Brandon for getting me on that one, because I saw that one. I've been sitting on that one for about 45 minutes now, just like, where am I?
That's a great question.
I mean, and it's true, because obviously, like any industry, you're going to find this kind of extortions and these issues, no matter who you deal with. But getting back to like the flower thing, like one of the things I want to bring up to both you guys actually, because it's something we talk about all the time, and something that I mentioned to Brandon earlier. There's a great article out right now about how there's a flower shortage, right? We all know there's kind of a flower shortage, and we all have speculations and why prices are going up. And a lot of people blame dispensaries and things like that, right? But what's interesting in the market right now is Colorado's bud supply is dangerously low, right? It's kind of like the East Coast. A lot of us are dangerously low right now, right? But Oregon is sitting on how many tons of cannabis, right? And they technically can ship out of the state now. So why are we seeing this, Tim? Like,
whoa. Technically shipped out of the state. Be very careful with that. They cannot technically ship out of the state. Absolutely not. That is not true by any stretch of the imagination. That is still interstate transport. There is no federal exception for Oregon. Oregon passed the law, which under state law would allow it to exchange with another state that passed another similar law. No states have yet passed that similar law, and even if they did, that would still be in violation of federal law. So they cannot just ship cannabis out.
I'm not saying ship.
Be very, very careful of that. There's still right now seizures and cases going on for hemp is being transported across state lines. Mm-hmm. And that is perfectly legal. Yet cases like Big Sky show you that's still being busted. Mm-hmm. You ship cannabis outside of a state line, you're just asking for federal prosecution.
Right.
They're prosecuting my guy for 67 plants in Vermont. Right. Believe me, they're going to
think of it like this.
I mean, well, there was an
You're going to leave Oregon, right? You either have to go through Idaho or Utah.
And neither of which do you want to be in.
No.
I just read something on they were this very, very good canon law blog. And give a shout out, Harris Bricken, it's called. Check it out. They do the canon law blog, by far the best blog in cannabis law. Some really fascinating issues, and they've been doing this 50-state series where they're looking at the hemp laws of each and every state. They started with A's and Alabama, and they're going right on down to Wyoming. And they just did Idaho, and the whole thing started out. Idaho, without a doubt, is the worst state for hemp. You will be prosecuted as it was high-test cannabis for hemp containing any trace of THC in that state. And they ended the summary with avoid Idaho at all costs. So that's definitely not a state you want to be anywhere near with anything cannabis related.
There was a couple of weeks ago there, and I'm scrambling to try and find the article. It was one that I was going to bring up, and we never really got to it. It was basically the same issue as we saw a few months ago with the truck that was transporting a load of hemp, right? And they seized a truck, they tested it.
That was Big Sky. That's the case. Yeah, right. That's the case I was talking about. Big Sky Scientific.
Well, I read one a couple weeks ago where it was almost the same kind of story. I almost had to double check to make sure it wasn't the same kind of story, but what was ironic about this story was it went from a legal state through the neighboring legal state where the shipment was caught and arrested and now face federal charges like you were just saying. So, and that was from a neighboring legal state to a neighboring legal state. So, like, we here in New England have this weird thing with New Hampshire kind of like, blocking everything in the middle, right? Because, Vermont can go to Mass and Mass can go to Maine, right? But what people don't realize is, still, we saw it with MCR Labs where they actually had a federal indictment brought up against them because someone had transported legal cannabis from Maine into legal cannabis state Massachusetts, but because they crossed the state line, it became a federally charged case where they're indicted on that. So, just things for people to be aware of, guys, especially.
Oh yeah. The federal, and the federal enforcement, it has surprised me a little bit, and it's made me reevaluate my advice to our clients quite a bit. We are seeing more, at least from on the ground perspective, both, there's two in the District of Vermont, but the case in Massachusetts you just mentioned, we've seen more very similar ones from some oil being transported from Minnesota under a state legal system to New York under a state legal system. That was prosecuted. The hemp case, I think, you're talking about was in Oklahoma, which is a pilot program legal state. There was a state prosecution of a load going through there. We are starting to see some, and, I hope this is the last dying gasp of cannabis prohibition that we're seeing now. But it is concerning, and that's why it is so important for people to reach out to their state, their senators and representatives, their national senators, their national representatives, and really push things like the State Banking Act and the States Act, which will, really give states protection both in the adult use and medicinal programs from federal prosecution. That still won't clear up the problem of interstate transport, but that's the next logical step. Every step we make at the federal level puts us in position to make the next step. And that's, that's where we see this industry really take off. That's when we are treated like any other industry. When we are able to work like any other industry, that's when you're going to really see things really flourish.
So, your own personal opinion, Tim, right now, you're the man, you follow this, you read it, you're really, you're in it, right? My question is, and you just kind of hinted at, which made me think about it, was, this year we have upcoming elections, right? We have all these elections are coming, all these new faces, all this new support. Do you think before or after this election season, we'll start to see a lot of these federal issues being fast-tracked, or do you think we're still going to? Do you think it's just smoke and mirrors at this point?
It all depends on who wins. It really, really, really does. Banking now, a lot of the progress in the Senate and in the House right now are being held up by 3 Republican senators. and our House of Representative member Lindsey Graham, Mike Crapo from Idaho, go figure, have been really fundamental. They chair very important committees, and as a chair of a committee, they have the ability to halt any discussion on legislation, even if it has a majority support. Right. So we're still seeing bottlenecks in one or two key individuals. If those individuals were to be out of office, I think you would see progress much quicker. I do believe that a Democratic president would definitely be more inclined to move this issue through. I do believe key Senate committee chairs being Democrats would facilitate this being moved through. So that's the answer to your question is it depends who wins.
Right.
And if people support cannabis, they should get out there and they should do some research. Learn about the candidates in your district who you can vote for. It's not always red and blue, black and white either. It's not necessarily always the Democrat that supports it and the Republican that's against it. You're starting to see that actually flip sometimes.
Yep.
But the Democratic presidential candidates are all pretty much in support of legalization, with the exception of Joe Biden, who's still stuck in decrim. But they're all at least positive towards momentum. So get out there, learn your, representatives, learn your senators, learn their positions. Even if it's just one position you care about, find out where they stand on cannabis, and then vote.
Right.
That's the fastest way to get in the
it really does seem like on both sides of this party line, right, that people are coming together with bipartisan opinions and views on this, and they're agreeing, right? Like
it's more of an age gap than a party gap. It really is.
Yep, exactly. I mean, it's generational, and again, does that go back to the stigmas that were pushed on us for the last 50 years, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, it's just and we see that a lot now, which makes it one of those amazing conversations, because what's the biggest population of our people going and looking and moving towards the CBD realm? It's our seniors, right? It's our older people. So you would think that there'd be a little bit more open-mindedness, but then again, when you're in office combating something for so long, it's hard to make that flip. One thing I just wanted to touch base with you, Tim, and I wanted to see if you saw this, and then just let people in Vermont and across the state know how this affects them, is that the USDA says hemp now qualifies for federal crop insurance.
Yes, and that was actually part of the Farm Bill. We knew this was coming, so it wasn't a huge surprise. We've actually talked to a couple of insurance professionals who are telling us that, they're still about going to be a year off simply because they're trying to figure out the numbers, trying to figure out what to charge for it, trying to figure out what the exposure is going to be. So they're still in the research and data compilation phase where they're figuring out how much to milk us for.
Right.
But it is, I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, but it will be a great relief for farmers to know that at least they'll have that security moving forward in the industry, especially when it comes to hemp and CBD.
Yeah.
That is as much as you can really succeed in that, you can also epically fail, especially if you don't have the experience in the industry, experience with the crop, experience with post-production, post-harvest activities. If you don't know what winterization is, you're going to have a bad time.
Right.
And unfortunately, quite a few people who jumped in thinking it was the next gold rush. So crop insurance is, at least going to give people starting out in this and more experienced farmers a little more security, and I think that will also just spur growth in the industry.
I mean, especially we just saw a major region in America just get thrashed by storms, which affected tons of thousands of hemp plants, right? What's nice about the hemp plant, and what Brendan touched on earlier, and we discussed it, is being used as an industrial viable option for paper and materials, is that every 3 months you get a new product, right? So it's not like trees where it takes years and years and years to grow back. The soils are still rich. You can do it again. It makes it nice and easy. But anyways. Yeah, so a lot of crazy stuff going on in the industry. In the industry, we could go on and on because there's schools talking about opening up new schools. There's all sorts of things going on. But this week, right now, right, the government said they're going to open up conversations about legalization again. Correct?
Yes, I mean this is more and more again. Because of the popular support, this is no longer a third-rail issue. This is no longer an issue that politicians are shying away from, combined with the also, interestingly, this week coming out, ArcView estimate of a 47 or $48 billion cannabis industry by the year 2024. Right. When you have popular support and numbers that start with Bs, you start to get a lot more interest at the federal level. We're seeing research grants being now proposed. We're seeing the DEA finally getting around to at least saying that they're going to start issuing licenses for more research, yes. Which they've held up years in doing. Despite multiple agencies telling them to. Which
basically that includes licensing cannabis growers. So they're going to expand that, which is what we need in this country.
Right, there's been one. There's one. The University of Mississippi was the only licensed producer, and they produce crap. That's a known fact. So this will, really allow an expansion of the research. Is it still going to be stymied by absurd, ridiculous regulation? Probably for a little while. But again, like I said before, every little step we take gets us closer to that next step. So it is moving. We are seeing this discussion happen. There's a congressional cannabis caucus. We thought that would have happened a few years back. Right. So that's why I'm optimistic on change at the federal level. I do think we're going to see something within the next year to two, something major, a real paradigm shift. Will it be full legalization? Probably not. The States Act perhaps, some basic hands-off policies that are enshrined in statute. I do think we're going to be seeing that sooner rather than later.
Right. I mean, we face that issue in this country where, we talked about before where, there's lots of applications in for these research licenses, right? But the government hasn't allowed any of them to proceed.
The DEA specifically has not allowed any of them to proceed. Yeah. The judiciary has actually ordered the DEA to let them proceed at this point.
Which is interesting because now we're having like this intergovernment agency kind of thing pushing towards legalization as well. But, I read a great article last week. Now, obviously, you talked about the rollouts, how fast we can make things happen, how fast we can do things. I mean, even in Canada right now, there's articles talking about how they can't keep up with the request to just study cannabis, because there's licenses and coming in, requests coming in, and how do you pick and choose who these people are that get these licenses, correct?
Right.
So, again, guys, it's the end game, right? It's going to be a long haul. Something's going to happen very quickly. The best thing, as Tim states, and we discuss to you all the time now, it's the time of year right now to reach out to your politicians, your lawmakers, the people that that are in power within the government, state, and even town agencies, because a lot of this is trickling down to your communities as well, people. So when your state goes legal, your community has that right to still have an agreement or not with that law or cannabis businesses within your agreement. So get educated, know what's going on. Like we discuss every day, every state is so different, no matter if they're next door to each other or across the country right now. And then be careful because they are still prosecuting you.
They are still prosecuting you. Joe, if I can just jump in too, if anybody has questions about this, if you're not sure how to contact your senator or your rep, or you're not sure how your state senator, give us a call at Vermont Cannabis Solutions. We're happy to talk to you about this. If you have questions about what is or what's not illegal, if you have concerns, if you want to know if your town is looking to opt in or opt out, don't hesitate to give us a call. Andrew and myself love to talk about this all day. So I just want to put that out there to people too. Don't feel like, you want to do something but just don't know how. Just give us a call.
Right. And if you also want to shake the Timothy Fair's hand, tell about your luncheons, Tim.
Luncheons have been amazing. We just had about 35, 40 people show up this month for Trace, who's going to have the contract for seed-to-sale tracking in the state of Vermont. They came out, went through what they're all about, the company and the services they have. Really exciting. Our next one is going to be the first Wednesday of October. From 12 to 2, it's going to be at Contoy's Auditorium in Burlington City Hall. We actually got a fantastic panel, including a state senator, including Dave Silberman, Laura Subin from the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana and the Marijuana Policy Project. And we're going to be having a great discussion about S54, the tax and reg bill that's currently pending in the Vermont legislature. Our own Andrew Subin will be moderating the panel. It's going to be a blast. I really highly recommend everybody come out.
And people be aware, just like we had Eli Harrington on last week with us. These guys are the time is now. Let's not wait, guys. It might seem early to you. It might not seem like the right time to you to voice your opinion, but right now is the time to.
Oh no, that was the time.
Yeah,
that was the time. Everybody's got to get out. Everybody should educate themselves on this bill and advocate for this bill. We need to get this done. We need to get a cannabis control board established in the state of Vermont. We need to move the industry forward. It's absolutely critical. And this is definitely the time, Joe. You're absolutely right.
So, guys, reach out, find the people, find the places. Vermont Growers Association is a newly formed association that is going to be fighting on the state side of things. So if you guys wanted to contact, ask questions, raise concerns, and also support, obviously, like we said, Vermont Fair, Timothy Fair, Vermont Cannabis Solutions. You have Eli Harrington and the whole crew that were here just a few weeks ago, last week, right, for Vermont Growers Association. Reach out, find out what you can do. Though Eli, as we know for years, is well integrated into the political scene. So you guys can get a great idea of where and how. And we want to know what you guys think is right. Obviously, everybody has a different opinion. Everybody has a different want or need. Let's sit down and talk about this, and let's see if we can get this across this year with the support that we have. Like we said, there's 4 times the amount of hemp farmers or hemp being grown this year alone. So it's a market that isn't going anywhere. So one more thing, Tim, before we have to head out, I just want to ask you is we see Michigan becomes the first state to ban flavored e-cigarettes. We know recently, just this past weekend, Vermont, the state that we are in, just upped the smoking age to 21. Do you think that we'll start this will become a nationwide trend against the e-flavored cigarettes or the vape carts?
Absolutely. This is going to be, it'll be 21. I guess against nicotine smoking and the issue of combating teen nicotine use is, it's a no-brainer for politicians. It's a no-brainer for legislators. Who's going to say that a kid smoking or kid getting hooked on Juuls is a good thing? Nobody. Right. The problem is that the ancillary damage that does to the hemp, CBD, and cannabis industries, which have absolutely nothing to do with teen nicotine use, right. Apples and friggin' baseballs. So, what we have to do is, and again, we're currently looking at trying to challenge the Vermont state law on this matter. And your individual communities, your individual states, people listening, pay attention. If these type of laws are proposed, you're not going to beat the law, but what you can do is try to make sure that as it's being drafted, as it's being written, that the people empowered to do so are considering the potential effects on our industry and limiting these laws to things that involve teenage nicotine addiction, and not just simply broad-based laws like we saw here in Vermont that encompass industries and products that have absolutely nothing to do with it.
Right. Now, just one more quick thing off the side of things. I saw an interesting thing and a great conversation about government, right? Ted Cruz introduced a bill limit that would allow just 2 terms for senators. Is this something that we should really focus on doing? Because, obviously, as we were talking earlier, there seems to be a growing age difference between, maybe it's a good or bad thing. I'm sure the conversation can be both on good sides. The age gap differences between what is our hot button topic and subject that we need to focus on in our country right now versus the people who are in charge of making the laws for that. Obviously, people don't want to see change a lot of times. But now with the 2 terms for senators, is this something that could actually happen?
I honestly, I'm not sure. I don't actually listen to Ted Cruz very much, so I'm not quite sure under what context that was under. Maybe you can explain just a little more. I hadn't heard that.
Well, no, he just introduced a term limit bill.
Term limits for what position? For a senator, for president?
Yeah, for senators for a 2-year term. And you could do 2 6-year terms. And, a lot of times, as you say, we see a lot of these senators that are in office for 20-plus years, right? And obviously, when you're in the office for 20-plus years, probably not much has changed in the way you look, think, and act in your opinion goes, right? So in these situations like we see right now where cannabis and then, now we have mushrooms and we have all these decriminalizations and, some of these countries are just decriminalizing everything, right?
Right.
Now we see Mexico, like we talked about last week, cocaine, you know what I mean? Of all things. So,
Down in Tijuana.
Right.
Term limits always have historically, this has been something that's been debated for decades and decades, and it goes far beyond just, the discussion of drug policy. And it's always the trade-off, new blood versus experience. And it's the senators and the politicians that you want in office for a long time are the good ones, are the ones that are rational, are the ones that are reasonable, are the ones that know how to accomplish, know what they're doing, understand the system, work for the people, care about what they're doing, not pursuing a personalized agenda. So those type of politicians you don't want to have to kick out. But on the other side is the entrenched politicians who are horrible, who are self-serving, who have used their office for personal gain and have done so for year after year after year after year. And those are the ones you do want to get out. And sometimes you want new blood coming in. But unfortunately, as we saw with the Tea Party revolution, a lot of times with new blood is a little bit of crazy. So, it's always been a kind of back and forth. I don't know if term limits are going to do any good. Ultimately, who can run for office? People with a ridiculous amount of money, for the most part. Is that going to change based on how long they're going to be there? I don't know. I'd like to see government be made more accessible to the average person. You see a few stories like AOC there coming up as a bartender, but that's certainly the exception to the rule. So I think it's a lot more important opening up access to political office to the general public, to everybody, make it accessible, make it possible for anybody to run. That, to me, is a much higher priority than how long the person's staying in.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
But that's just 100%. Me. But anyway, Joe, unfortunately, I do have to run. And Brandon, I just want to say thank you so much, guys, as always. And have a great rest of the show.
Hey, you too. Have a great day, Tim.
All right, absolutely. I don't know. Did we lose Joe?
I hope not.
The ship without a captain.
That would not be a good thing. No, I don't think so.
I'm sure he's around there somewhere. All right, you guys have a great rest of the show, and I will definitely talk to you next week.
Oh, definitely.
Bye.
Mr. Joseph Smith. Either your microphone is muted or you are not at the microphone. Or either way. I hear the dreaded telephone call coming up in the background, huh?
All right, guys. Sorry about that.
We thought we lost you.
You did for a minute. I just had to run outside the studio for real quick to grab something. Federal guys, go support it. Go find it. I'm trying to find a video I thought I had ready for us guys here, which I don't right now, unfortunately. But we're going to find another one here. Hold on. So, Tim. Again, thank you guys for coming on today. We got to wrap up the show here as soon as we can. We do have another show coming on. I want to give a big shout out to everybody that's involved in producing the show with us today. It's been a great show. We can't thank you guys enough for coming on. We're going to end it with a commercial from the 70s for marijuana prohibition. And we'll see you next week. Don't go anywhere, guys. This is WGDR Plainfield, WGDH Hardwick, Garrett College Community Radio, In the Weeds with Joseph Smith, Brandon Barberio, and our good friend Timothy Fair of Vermont Cannabis Solutions.
Hey, young America, we need to talk. You may think this is uncool. You may even think it is bogus. But I want to tell you about something that has everyone buzzing. Something that concerns mature boys and girls just like you. Something called grass. Not that grass. I'm talking about marijuana. You may have heard of it. You may have seen someone smoking it, like those burnout bohemians or that crazy-eyed custodian at your school. You may have taken a toke or two. But do you know the whole story? Do you know the blunt truth? Weed, grass, ganja, joint, doobie, do, chronic, ace, lobo, loco, love boat, bud, Buddha, blunt, pot, pat, pin, chiba, 420, and hashish, or hash for short. No matter what you call it, no matter what hip street lit it's referred or referred to by, it all comes from the same stash. It's all marijuana. I know what you're thinking. What is marijuana? What makes marijuana so dangerous? Where can I get some marijuana? Well, brother, I'm not going to nickel and dime you. I'm not like the man all you kids are rebelling against. I'm hip. I know what young people are dealing with these days. In fact, here are some of my free-thinking friends to prove how completely not square I really am.
Parents are hypocrites. They tell us one thing, but then they do another. Why don't they practice what they preach?
Adults never have time to listen to us. And when they do, they just don't do what we're saying. Why can't we dress the way we want in school?
So what about grass? Let's start with the basics. Marijuana is a plant that grows best with plenty of water and sunlight. Its leaves extend outwards in a star pattern some say resembles a hand, an open palm reaching out to claim its next victim. Rolled in zigzags, or puffed from 7th period woodshop projects, the smoke from this plant causes a brief state of euphoria, immediately followed by permanent insanity. Users are prone to unpredictable behavior, including junk food binges, joyride, and a sudden urge to wear sunglasses at night.
Marijuana should be illegal. Now!
Plus, they look flat out crazy. You there! Stop laughing. Laughing is a symptom caused by blowing pot. Take a good look at yourself. Are you addicted? Are your eyes half shut and bloodshot? Do you recognize that person in the mirror? Then blame it all on marijuana. Long-term use of marijuana can lead to a psychological dependency. Soon, you'll be taking all sorts of measures to get your fix. People will start calling you names like pothead or Smoky McBongwater. Losing all motivation, it's likely that you will drop out of school, take a sudden liking to sitar music, and maybe even get felt up by a cop or two. So why smoke grass?
I took it on a dare.
And if I dared you to jump off a cliff, would you do that too?
Man, everybody blows pot.
I know this one guy that doesn't. Wait, not that guy. This guy.
Oh, no, thank you. Not for me.
When I'm high, it enhances my creativity.
No, it doesn't. Look at these paintings. The artist was stoned when he painted these. Those don't look like real flowers. Is marijuana really where it's at? Is it really as righteous as you think? There is more to life than